All right. Okay, so let's start kind of from the beginning. So I guess for today, the main agenda is about preparing for the workshop in Shanghai next week, next Monday, right? Um, and so action item was from last week's discussion about preparing slides that we can review for the update for the work group session in a workshop. So yeah, don't upload it. I just see the slides. Um, did you guys have a chance to review this in detail?
No, Milan, I didn't.
I didn't either. I just basically saw this just now. Let me share the screen.
Is it uploaded in a website somewhere?
So if you go on the Gitter, if you go on the Gitter, he posted the message with the link. All right. Okay, you guys see what I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the link that he posted. It's a Google Doc account. Are you guys okay using Google Doc account? I know Saurabh said a while back that he is not allowed or by company policy to access Google Docs, right? Is it true, Saurabh?
Not anymore, Milan. I got access now. I can check it.
Okay. Okay, so so anyway, I'm seeing this is the slides. These are the slides. I'm seeing this for the first time, and so I'm not sure how productive this will be if you didn't check it so far. But um, the key challenge, let me start stating maybe from last week's discussion and that we had, and I think Manash wasn't there though. It was about. It seems like we came to a bit of a crossroads in terms of this working group, to me at least, in a way that we couldn't totally agree on updated statement of work and what is the scope of our efforts. I think it was a discussion between like stated, using profiles as a compliance criteria and defining compliance um, around the profiles versus like, you know, having that, having and how that applies to the devices like that have dynamic execution environment, like for example PCs, right, and laptops, and what does compliance means. Furthermore, it felt like there's also desire to engage into defining and using profiles as an execution control mechanism or a hint to the for whoever is running the device, the model on device, that they can be hinted to okay, to execute given model on a certain profile. And so those are the two kind of I felt kind of conflicting arguments, and there is I would say there is no agreement right now in terms of in between the contributors to this work group in terms of what should be or should not be in a statement of work. I mean, right now, my opinion and Offer's opinion, we disagree. I feel that the control of the dynamic control of the execution and so on through profiles is a part of this working group charter.
So I think I agree to that statement, Milan. I don't think it's the charter either.
I agree too. So, Saurabh, sorry, you were saying something, but you're coming across faint, so I'm speaking.
Yes, very faint.
So can you repeat what you said, Saurabh?
Sure. I think as of right now, ONNX does not describe how to run a model. It describes what to run in a model, right? Unless ONNX expands the scope and starts making contributions in the spec where we can describe that this model needs to be run like this, only then I think as a working group we can take that on. The challenge I was having with the current approach we have with edge profiles is, as part of some of the attributes in edge profile, we are describing things like accuracy, things like throughput, and other performance KPIs, which ventures us into a place where we are actually saying how to run a model, which makes it somewhat ambiguous for a multi-function or a integrated device which has many ways to run the same platform. And where we left off last week was like in an integrated device like a PC, what gets certified? Is it just the IP, or we are certifying the whole platform? Because I could run the same model either on a GPU, which would be very different in terms of accuracy, with some other accelerator, or with a like CPU would be different. So that's where probably we need a little bit more clarification what we mean by profiles, and what do they mean for a device which has many IPs?
So I think let me try and provide my point of view on that. And I think there is, in a way, there is some reference to that because recently I've been looking into the MNPerf published results. And I'm thinking about applying some of the principles in their description of how to do testing into what we're trying to do. Sorry for a second. There's an airplane. Okay. I think, well, getting for a second to the basis of what we want to do, we want to create a profile that would map into some kind of tests. So this profile is for certification. It would head mapping into a test package. Like the way that I see it, and maybe we should probably better clarify it in the statement of work, profile is to certify something and it is connected to a test package. The way that you run this test package, I think, is where we need to better clarify. So first of all, this test package need to be run in a kind of steering or isolated environment that only this test package is running on the device. It doesn't certify that the models that pass on this test would be able to pass in any other runtime scenario. It only certifies that the device on IDing state would be able to run this test package. That's one thing. And the other thing, part of the test, the vendor that is going to pass the test would need to provide details on what were the test conditions. So if he has, for example, take Snapdragon, Qualcomm Snapdragon. We have 4 ways right now to run stuff. Okay, we can run it in 4 different ways, basically. Each one of these ways can have different characteristics. So if I want to certify our platform on a single profile, I would actually have to submit it 4 times for the 4 different runs if I want to cover the entire scope. Or I decide that I certify it only for DSP. Okay, that's fine. But if I want to certify it for DSP and GPU together, I would have to submit 2 separated runs, which each one will have different latency and accuracy characteristics, but they're still meeting the profiling boundaries. So I think with these clarifications that we are focusing on conformance or compliance, that we are defining IDing test conditions, this is where we can, someone is making noises in the background,
Yeah.
pushing papers and stuff. Anyway, so I think that if we would clarify these 2 points and everybody would agree that these are the things that need to go as clarifications into the statement of work and into the profiling definition, then I think I think that we have a way forward to continue with the work that we are doing. And whatever comes next after we do that, maybe part of the recommendation would be how can we extend it beyond just certification, validation into other usages, right? And then meeting what you said, Saurabh, that may require some additional changes into the modern protobuf. It would require extending the scope of entire ONNX, maybe. That can be part of next steps recommendation that shouldn't, in my view, it shouldn't gate the activity of this working group.
Go ahead, Vanash.
Yeah, so Ofer, I agree with you. I wanted to add that, while we all agree that we need to define the profiles, right? There is no disagreement on the need to define the profiles. I think where we are going back and forth is how that information is going to be used. From a device perspective, I think what you're suggesting is that the profile information could be used to validate capability of the device about executing model. I would also like to add that that profile information could be useful for the model creator, in this case, the converters, where the ONNX graph is generated. And this profile information could be a path for the model creator to target specific execution type or execution modes for his or her graph. And we should consider that.
But is that something that is a scope of this working group? Really? I mean, we are getting back to this, how something needs to be run. I mean, I agree that this is an interesting idea, but is that the scope of this working group, basically?
So it goes to Ofer's second point, though, right? That once you have a profile, how do you get the profile information? It has to be part of some ONNX working group where that those profiles are embedded inside the ONNX graph.
Why? I mean, in a sense, like if we are if we are defining the test package to continue on offers, if I understood it correctly, if we have a profile and there is a test package that describes clearly on the given device and how to execute, and actually completely describes how to execute the given model on a given device with what in what environment. It's like full description of the setup, right? And how to, well, proposal is that we say that the test package that is provided is providing the bounds on how this profile is executed, and hence, if you do it that way, it will meet the given profile characteristics, and that is for us to say if that is satisfied. That means the device under these circumstances, when tested like this, is meeting the profile requirement. And now having something more formal in the ONNX spec that is kind of embedding this information into the profile, perhaps it's not necessary here. I mean, it seems like, somewhat superficial here in the context of just testing and compliance. That's my view.
Right. So I think that's a good point too. So what I was trying to ask is, are there examples? I know maybe I'm not familiar with what Ofer was mentioning. In our experience, as a platform, there's a lot of chaos going on in a general purpose computing device. Some of the concepts like isolating a particular IP and just running it on GPU might be well very much possible in an IoT kind of device where not a lot of things are going on. But in a general purpose computing device, you have sometimes thousands of processes running all the time. Running an IP does not mean you don't need a CPU. It might, it just depends on the CPU you have. And just because we are trying to be very comprehensive and we want this to be a certifying, like a compliance kind of a thing, that's what is worrying me, that this ambiguity might hurt us. We cannot say that, I've isolated an IP and this is the perf that I see and I want, compliance around it. It will be very, at least in my experience, I don't have any other instances where such a thing has been done before, because it being a general purpose, very chaotic environment. In case of, like a general purpose device like a PC, which is scalable, configurable.
But this is exactly, again, if you look at MNPerf, this is exactly what's happening in MNPerf. There is a test, and companies submit the results of the test that include how many inferences per second and what was the accuracy of what they managed to achieve. And of course, when they do that, and by the way, there is a test of Intel submitting CPU tests. I would imagine Intel submitted a bunch of different test results. One of them was CPU only. The other one was CPU with the new NNPI accelerator. So I would imagine that when you're running MNPerf tests on the CPU only, you're trying to make sure that your system is as clean and as basic as possible, because this is what the test defines, that you should strive to get to a situation that your system or the tested IP is in maximum possible capacity, however you do that. And
I'm with you, Ofer, but the MLPerf is a benchmarking environment. It's not a compliance authority, right? We can do things in a non-general way, and we can make a device isolated just for that benchmarking, marketing.
But MNPerf is testing both latency and accuracy. I agree with you, but MNPerf, if you look at the results, is testing latency and accuracy. So it is not a certification thing, and the certification is actually what we want to achieve here, because MNPerf is only running 2 or 3 modems. What we want to do is to cover a wider range of modems and tell you that in IDIN, the maximum best scenario that you can do, you are able to reach this latency and this accuracy. It's not given, by the way. It's not 100% sure that even in IDIN relations, the device would be able to achieve these things. Okay, I understand your point that you're saying the device was able to achieve it in IDIN relations. What does it actually mean for the runtime characteristics? And my answer is, well, probably that's a different subject. The subject that we're trying to tackle here is, given IDIN conditions, if you have IDIN conditions on a specific target IP, can you meet these attributes for these models? If you are, then you're certified. I think that should be the goal and spirit of the effort.
I think, I don't know you mean by an isolated environment yet. Like it's not, like in a benchmarking environment is very different than a compliance environment. And the ambiguity is where I want more clarity, that I think it would help us understand things more.
Maybe our term compliance is a strong term. I mean, in essence, what we are trying to achieve, and we started a long time ago mentioning potentially, aligning with ML-Perf as a kind of effort or body that we could leverage the approach for a sort of certification. In essence, the ML-Perf is providing two things: performance and accuracy. They are now they are not what is not there is not saying they're not going step above. They're not saying they're just reporting results, right? And this is what you can achieve if you do this. You run the test like this, you get this, right? And we are trying to say that we are tying these test results with meeting criteria that belongs to a given profile. And this is where we are struggling. This is the step where we are going, I feel, saying like this is a strong thing that you're saying you meet this profile characteristics and then you say you are compliant with this profile. That is our goal, right? That was our general guide, right? Now, so clearly test results, if you use ML-Perf use case and they are reporting the results with a well-defined infrastructure or rules around it, submitting the actually full test package and test execution environment and all that stuff. So once with this setup, they report results, accuracy and performance. We have a few others, but maybe that's like now going beyond it. But let's stay with performance and accuracy. So once you report the results, with this setup, that is very well-defined setup, right? For any device, there is like anybody could report results with a description that was provided. Once you have results, it is, it's technically saying, okay, now I have these results. Now, given these results, I am compliant with these ONNX profiles that we define. That is all we are trying to say. Is that ambiguous?
Yeah, because we cannot guarantee, because it's a very strong compliance and a certifying statement we're making. We need to guarantee that when we said that it will run a certain way, we cannot guarantee that in a general purpose computing environment where there is a chaos going on. Because
yeah, but the point being is like even on a laptop or anywhere, right? You could describe a test environment, meaning like I am booting the stock Windows version, whatever, and running. You could describe exactly how you boot. Yes, there are many processes behind the scenes. You could say, okay, Wi-Fi is turned off, screen is turned off. You could describe a whole set of things that will constrain the environment, right? And you say, and I run test. This is as good as you can get on Qualcomm Snapdragon, or we, to us, that is, acceptable in a way. You describe your environment and you say, I run 50 runs in this setup and I get these results. Under these conditions, I'm meeting these profiles. That's basically the workflow. Now, if we are saying that that's not sufficient to describe the test setup or constrain the execution around the test and constrain other PCs in a more complex devices like PC, then okay, then then we have disagreement basically, right? That's where we are, and so.
So may I interrupt you? I am interrupting you. What would that information do once you have passed a compliance test? Therefore, what happens?
Therefore, what happens? So the goal was that through this mechanism, company could test ONNX models and report results and compliance with certain profiles for their devices. Again, describing the given the test environment. Now,
so is it going to be equivalent to some kind of a benchmark that MLPerf is trying to do? Like
it is partially equivalent in the sense, like, yes, there is a benchmark part because you have to measure, right? But then after the benchmark, there's a step saying with these results we are meeting these profiles that are defined in ONNX edge.
So I just want to maybe clarify the difference here between what we're trying to do and what MLPerf is trying to do. We are not trying to benchmark how many inferences per second some IP is achieving. What we're trying to say, there is a latency number, let's say 10 milliseconds. If you meet this latency number, you pass the compliance. We don't care if you manage to do it in 8 or if you manage to do it in 5. This is benchmarking. We're not benchmarking.
Right.
We're just saying once you meet below 10 milliseconds, you are compliant. So it's a different state of mind, and we can actually talk about when publishing the actual results of the test, how do we make sure that someone is, maybe there's a way for someone to publish the results without actually publishing the actual number. That's a different discussion. But to your point, Manash, about what do we do with these results, it's a very good point, and it's kind of a wider question. I forgot if it was you or Suraj that raised it a couple of minutes ago. The question is actually, what's the scope of ONNX in general, the ONNX project? So in the limitations of the existing ONNX project, the best we can do now is to create a location in GitHub that people can put results into, and we can publish the results. This is what we can do with the current limitations of ONNX activities. We can come up with a recommendation that says there needs to be a way to query that, and that way is probably some API or something like that, but that would require ONNX steering group to come and say that they want to create a working group that defines an API, because so far there isn't such an effort. So in order to have our working group successful and meet whatever it needs to do, we need to bound it so that we can achieve something within the limitations of the existing ONNX project and provide recommendations for the next steps to the steering group in a way. That's the way that I think it. I think that if we will come up and start spending time on defining an API, we would come back to the SIGs or the steering groups, and they said, well, that was not the mandate, and this is actually something beyond the scope of ONNX. So instead of spending time defining the API, we should just come with a recommendation that says, as a next step, we suggest that the ONNX steering group would extend the scope of ONNX project to define an API. Once it does it, we kick off a working group to describe exactly how the API looks like that queries profiles. And maybe, by the way, this API is also going to do what Suraj wants to do, which is to query.
Yeah, I actually agree to what Offer is saying, right? The ambiguity I'm again repeatedly saying about, right? The environment that I'm exposed to is very dynamic. We have power as an attribute, we have throughput as an attribute. The IP is itself balanced, like the throttle thermal because of thermal reasons or frequency reasons, and we have power as an attribute. Where I'm struggling is I don't see a way to create an isolated environment without having an IP level control and actually be able to describe the working environment all the way to the IP. Because without it, the results would not make a lot of sense. I don't know when the workload was run, whether I was in power saving mode or I was not, whether I was able to, what's the number I'm quoting then on power attribute for that profile, or when I'm doing throughput, what's the number I should be quoting at that time, because I ended up picking something which impacted my accuracy also. So it's quite the environment that we're running in needs to be also described when we are coming. To me, they are just hand in glove kind of a thing. Otherwise, we have ambiguity. So,
and sort of, I agree with you. I believe that this is a two-part situation. One is having the profile compliance, but the second part is how are you going to execute in a given situation, a given model.
Okay. Well,
so I think we have to run it into the slides that we're going to present in the workshop to kind of show what are the questions that we have been struggling with, and to get to some clarity saying, this is what we're going to focus, and we know that there's some extra step that needed, but we think that it requires a change to the overall ONNX mandate, and that change, before doing that, before agreeing on this change, there is no point dwelling further into defining the second part.
do we agree with that?
And so you are saying that the ONNX working group SIG or the ONNX working group needs to define or agree on the expanded scope of that API before we go down and define the profiles on edge?
I'm saying that the steering group, we should provide recommendations in general lines how these profiles can be further used to query what a device can do and to query the dynamic state of the system so that someone would do what to do it. Describe it in a general line, give it to the steering group and say, that requires defining an API, which is right now outside the scope of ONNX project. Do you approve this activity? Do you approve extending the ONNX project scope? If they do, there's a point in going into the details how this API would look like. But I'm saying just the recommendation on extending the scope of the ONNX project at a very high level details is in the scope of this working group. The actual work of defining the APIs is not, because until we get approval, there's no point doing the work.
So this is like something something like SIG infrastructure SIG or something, right?
It's to me, I think it's steering.
It's a steering?
Because so far ONNX has been very careful not to define APIs. And from some reasons and some original direction guiding of what ONNX is and what ONNX is not. If we want to describe an API, that extends the scope of the ONNX project. I see it as steering, but...
Sure, but in a recommendation is a recommendation, and somebody needs to decide, in this case, probably steering, but I thought that whatever happened with ONNXify? I mean,
It, it feels good. It's being used by GNOME.
I mean, was it? Is it?
Yes, GNOME supports ONNXify.
So is it ONNXify API? I mean, in a sense, like, it defines API.
Yes,
It's
but
part of ONNX.
it was never officially promoted by the ONNX project. I don't think that if you look into, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's an open question which is good to raise at the workshop. Is defining an API approved, like, within the scope of the existing ONNX project? Because I don't think that ONNXify was ever officially defined as the way to load and run ONNX models.
Okay. So guys, we have 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe. So let's agree what do we need to put up in front of the audience in Shanghai, right? So we are saying that, I'm saying, like, based on this discussion, we are saying we are on a crossroads in the sense, like, there is a how and there is what, right? There's a compliance part, there's a how part. And how to basically define how part is critical here, because without that, how to run certain tests, and you need certain, we think we need API control or changes to ONNX format, or also have API that can be used for each manufacturer to provide query into the or not just query, actually. It's also about direction of how to do and how to run certain model. So if this is what we want to say, then that's a front and center, right? I mean, you need to define these two things, and we recommend a steering committee to consider these things before we can. These things are critical before we can engage into the compliance stage. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, to me
how?
it is. To me it is. So,
yeah, I think I agree. Yeah.
By the way, we've also pondered on the security aspect. Do you guys know what is the official position of ONNX? What they mean by security here? Like, the other attributes make sense; they're generic enough, but security could mean different things to different people.
I think we stayed with the data locality in terms of the Edge working group. We have said that it's data locality aspect that we care about, whether, if profile defines data being local on device or accessed remotely, from to the cloud. Now that is connected with the security or privacy, but not necessarily security. What do you mean by security? Is that privacy or
no, I'm just, I was just looking at the screen and what Yuzong is in the slides, and in terms of the edge profile attributes, there is a security element there, and I don't know what it means in the ONNX world yet.
So I think, okay, that's fair point. I think here, this was like, just I feel like this was put up as examples of what attributes may be, but it's not necessarily final attributes, because there are 3 dots there. Because
I think that if we try to describe the test environment into more details, that can also serve to clarify the point that the idea is that all of your processing stays on the device or not, in a sense. And once you clarify the test environment for the profile, you actually clarify this point as well.
So I think this statement here, to just Saurabh's question, I mean, I don't think these are the final attributes we came up with, right? This was like statement of work about definition of edge profile and what attributes constitute edge profile. We have a document stating what are those attributes, right? So not necessarily these listed here. We have different. We have power, accuracy, speed, data locality, and one more. Wait a minute. Size, right? Size. Yeah, power, accuracy, speed, size, and data locality. Those are the 5 attributes that we define. We have basically concluded on that document. Now, whether that's security, I don't know, but this, as I said, I just want to point here that these are listed here as examples, not necessarily what we decided. And so we finished step 2 and we have an edge profile definition document defining the attributes. So now the question is like, is that final or not? Do we need to reopen? That's a different question. Okay, so let's try to come up with something. It looks like Yedong and Manash will be presenting together, right? I got some emails from Prashant and folks.
I think Yedong is going to present. I'm only in supporting role, but I will be presenting. Are any of you traveling?
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, cannot. I cannot nor offer go to Shanghai just for this meeting.
Okay. So let's make sure Yedong has the inputs and outcome from this, and I can definitely convey in the room the context from this working group. But he's going to be doing the speaking. Just want to be clear.
So okay, let's this has a lot of, we need to review this document. It has a lot of what we discussed. I feel like we may need we probably should have one more meeting before maybe Monday, maybe Friday morning, if okay with everybody, to come up with something that is final or close to final, what we want to present in a workshop. First of all, we need to comment this and capture what we discussed today. I'm not sure if it's captured already here. Probably not, because it's
Good.
I mean, we are here in these slides, we are technically repeating what we said in the last workshop, right? Or I feel we do. We didn't make much progress. And now we have to have an opening slide and a punchline saying we as a working group are sort of, I don't want to say blocked, but in some way we are blocked because we didn't have much progress in defining any profiles since last workshop. So, and this is why, right? This has to be up in front, otherwise it's just not accurate. Do you agree? To do this kind of presentation saying that the working group is at the basically it's blocked considering due to this.
I wouldn't say blocked. I think we now have more clarity on what the 2 key decision points are, and that we need to bring it up to the ONNX working group to identify that the API definition is going to take place, and we go proceed with defining the principles.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree in a way with what Manas said. That we were kind of we were rediscussing the direction of the working group, but it looks like we are converging into deciding what's inside the scope, what's not, and what needs additional clarification in order to better describe the profiles. So in a way, we are returning to redefine parts of the statement of work and to define a profile, because we also now, it's clear that we have to define part of the profile definition needs to be that there is a defined test environment and defined which device was tested, and that's probably going to be part of running the profile on some platform for certification purposes. So I think all of this we can actually come into describing in the next working group workshop session why there wasn't any progress on the profiles, because we had to come back to step back and redefine part of.
Okay, so do you agree that we should meet on Friday? Maybe I cannot tomorrow, but on Friday morning to try to close on this and at least review this slide or two that is opening, that is stating exactly what we discussed today.
I think so. We do. I can make it if everybody else can.
Yeah, I can make time at 8 a.m.
Yeah, 8 a.m. Friday morning.
Yep.
Okay, next thing, I need action items for somebody to prepare this slide or two stating what we, I was thinking, asking Saurabh if that's okay.
Sure, Ofer, I can do that. And I
Because
can do the
think
initial draft, and then we can meet and we can work on it together. I'll do the first draft, and we can discuss in the meeting more.
All right, perfect. Sounds good. So, okay. Well, we're out of time almost. I don't know if we need to spend just remaining 7 minutes here, but I think I'm gonna schedule a meeting for Friday morning to review the continue review the slides or information we want to share in a workshop. And Saurabh will have a draft of slides that will convey information we discussed basically today. Sounds good?
Yep. Okay, we'll talk on next slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.